This is The Inquiry. I'm Gregory Harms. Welcome to another unedited episode of my podcast. Because my editor is still in Asia. Which reminds me, I think that will be the next episode. Words I find problematic, like Asia and Mediterranean, and a list of others. I think that'll be the next episode. Words that basically bother me. Let's do that. Let's do that for the next episode. This episode will be about Socrates, the first great philosopher. Not the first philosopher, but the first great philosopher. He was born in 470 BC. He died in 399 BC. And I want to focus on Plato's Apology. Comes from the Greek word apologia, meaning defense. Because when you read it, you'll quickly pick up on the fact that Socrates is not apologizing. Not even close. It's a short read. I recommend everyone read it. All my students read it. We read it out loud in class. And if you want to embark on studies in philosophy, it's the first thing I recommend. It's the first protocol I recommend people read. It's a gem. I've read it God knows how many times. And there's always something there. Always something new. Something I didn't think about before. Yeah. It's like the Republic. It's like all these classic works. Like, you could read the Republic once a year for the rest of your life, and you'll find something in the Republic by Plato that I'm like, oh, I never thought about that, or I didn't, I didn't home in on that. Yeah, it's just a rich work, and the Apology is no different. So I want to talk about that a little bit today. So the Apologia, meaning defense. The Apology is unique in the works of Plato. It's common for Plato to use Socrates, his mentor, as a character, if you will, in the dialogues. Most of Plato's works are in the form of, it's like reading a play. It's like reading, it's a dialogue, if not, three people or four people involved in the conversation. But they're called the dialogues. And the Apology is unique in the dialogues because the Apology is Plato operating in the capacity of a journalist, after a fashion, or a court reporter, something like this. Socrates was arrested, and there was a trial. And Plato, longtime good friend of Socrates, was at the trial. He was a member of the jury. The jury was enormous. There was 500 guys. Sorry, ladies, you're not invited to these events in ancient Greece. You weren't really invited to any events in ancient Greece. So, enormous jury, 500 guys gathered around an open-air courtyard. And Plato was there that day and later wrote the Apology. We can assume safely, we can make a strong inductive inference that Plato got it pretty close. Is it word for word? No. Plato wrote the Apology, but you're reading Socrates' defense. He didn't bother with counsel, legal counsel. He just thought, I'd just go there and tell the truth. And so it's you're reading what Socrates allegedly said that day. But Plato wrote the work. Those are Plato's words. But I suspect that there's a number of like word for word bits in there. I suspect it's peppered with word for word quotes from Socrates, because Plato was a pretty bright bulb and he probably had a pretty decent memory. And so, yeah, there's probably a lot of actual wording in the Apology. Also, we can assume that Plato got it pretty close, at least in the tone. We get a sense of Socrates' personality. We get a sense of what happened that day. If Plato wrote just a bizarro account of the events, a lot of those guys in the jury, the 500, would have read this. And if Plato just made up a bunch of BS, then it would have tarnished Plato's reputation as a public intellectual. So we can assume, I think we can safely assume that Plato got it close. And like I said, I mean, we can't prove it, but I mean, I call it a hunch that it's peppered with word for word stuff that Socrates actually did say that day. So why was Socrates arrested? Why did this trial even take place? Well, we have to think about a couple things. One, Athens is not in a great mood. It just lost a pretty long and nasty war with Sparta called the Peloponnesian War, which lasted from 431 to 404 BC. Athens thought it had it in the bag, went in overconfident. Things did not go as planned, and Sparta ended up the victor. And then, to make matters worse, Sparta installed a client regime, and so Athens, what was left of it, was under foreign control in the form of a group of dictators that have been nicknamed the 30 Tyrants. Also, to make matters worse, or into the bargain, Athens suffered during the war a plague, and they had built a huge wall around themselves. They figured, all right, we'll just build this huge wall around ourselves, and then the Spartan army, which is really good, they won't be able to get to us, and then we'll take the fight to them on the high seas, because Athens had a really good navy. Sparta's navy was okay, and then it was reversed for the armies. Sparta had a really good army, and Athens had an okay army. So they took the fight to them on the high seas, and it was just one disaster after another, and Sparta won. And so the plague broke out, and you want to let a plague breathe. And now Athens is walled in, and people are dropping dead in the streets, and it was just a wreck. So Athens is, by 404 BC, Athens is shot to pieces and is not in great shape. This was the birthplace of democracy. Athens was a very vibrant place, a very vibrant culture, a lot going on, a breathtaking number of religious festivals. They ate a lot. They drank a lot of wine. We have baseball, and they had prostitution. That was their pastime. Male prostitution predominantly, but there were female prostitutes as well. But prostitution was really big in Athens, and eating and drinking and partying. very hospitable to foreign travelers, very hospitable to did a lot of foreign trade. It was the place to be. If you lived in ancient Greece at the time, then you'd probably want to live in Athens. You probably wouldn't want to live in Sparta. Sparta was inhospitable to foreigners, merchants and travelers and so on. They're kind of hermetic and highly militaristic, and you probably wouldn't want to live in Sparta. The joke in Athens is that the reason that the Spartans are so eager to die in battle is so they don't have to live in Sparta anymore. So that gives you, if that's any indication as to what life was like in Sparta. So you'd definitely want to live in Athens, I think. It's far more fun. It was far more enjoyable to live in Athens if you were male and you weren't a slave. It's not to say that it was a paradise, but it certainly. It was if you were male and not a slave, then it was okay, But if you're a female or a slave, wasn't great. But so Athens is not doing great. Second of all, there's this eccentric old man. His name is Socrates. And he spends his time in the agora. The agora was like the marketplace. And Socrates would, hang around the agora and irritate shopkeepers. And he was basically annoying. And it took a certain pleasure in being annoying. And he was kind of eccentric. It wasn't much to look at. He wore the same robe all the time. He never wore shoes, curiously. By all accounts, he wasn't, when we think of the ancient Greek, ideal, like young Athenian boys, suntanned and throwing the discus and reciting poetry and stuff. This is not Socrates. Socrates had a big bulbous misshapen nose, a big belly, scraggly hair, rather unkempt, and personal hygiene wasn't a top priority. And then the dirty robe and the bare feet. Socrates visually cuts across anything that we might assume about the ancient Greek ideal. So there he is in the agora, irritating shopkeepers and talking to the best and the brightest of Athenian society. His very good friend Chaerephon went to the oracle at Delphi. The oracle at Delphi was about 100 miles northwest of Athens on the top of Mount Parnassus. And the ruins are still there. There was a temple built to Apollo. And the idea was that Apollo, the god, lived in the mountain. And so anybody could go to consult the oracle. Anybody. I mean, like farmers, politicians, newlyweds, athletes, you name it, anybody. You could just go there and ask the oracle, for advice or, how the crop's going to do next season or whatever. It doesn't matter, whatever. So Chaerephon goes to the oracle at Delphi and consults the oracle. Now, if some of this sounds like The Matrix, there's a good reason for that. Because that's where they got that. The Wachowskis. If you watch The Matrix, when Neo goes to visit the oracle, there's a sign above her kitchen, the doorway into the kitchen. and the sign says temet noske. In Greek, it would have been notheseuton, meaning know thyself. And the same sign was adorned, I should say, the temple built to Apollo. Notheseuton, know thyself. So a lot of this will sound like the Matrix, and then there's a good reason for that. So the Caravan consults the oracle, and he asks the oracle. The oracle was like, there was a priestess there called the Pythia, and she positioned her chair. The version of this that there seems to be a scholarly agreement, that archaeological agreement, that there was a crack in the floor in the temple, and out of this crack was venting hydrocarbon gas from deep inside the mountain. And so the Pythia, the priestess, would position her like throne or chair or whatever over the crack, and she's breathing in these fumes, and she's smashed and mumbling gibberish because she's wasted. And so there'd be a priest nearby who would listen to the mumbling and listen to the gibberish, and he would interpret the gibberish. And then and the interpretation of the gibberish was Apollo speaking to you. So Caravan goes to the oracle and asks the oracle, is there anyone in Athens wiser than Socrates? And the oracle says no. Socrates is the wisest man in all of Athens. So Caravan brings this news back to Socrates and informs Socrates that the oracle has decided that he's the wisest man in all of Athens. Socrates doesn't really know what to do with this information. He's kind of confused by it. He says, why would Apollo say I'm the wisest man in all of Athens? Doesn't make any sense. I'm not a great poet. I'm not a great orator. I'm not a great law writer. I'm not a great anything. I just ask questions and do philosophy all day. Nevertheless, Socrates decides, all right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to check this out. Doesn't sound right, but I'm going to check it out. I'm going to ask, the so-called smart people, the best and the brightest, and I'm going to see what they have to say, because I think they know a lot more than I do, because they're really smart. So that's what he does. So this is a lot of this is many of Plato's dialogues, is Socrates talking to the so-called smart people. Now these so-called smart people were either themselves what you would call they were itinerant scholars called sophists. And many of the people that Socrates is talking with are themselves sophists, where we get the word sophisticated, or they were trained by sophists. Now the sophists, they were, like I said, itinerant scholars that went place to place, and if your father was loaded, then you probably went and studied with a sophist because they charged a lot of money, and they would groom you for your career. They would teach you how to use big words and how to, win arguments and blah, 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 so on and so forth. How to be flashy. How to, outwit your opponent and all this stuff. Socrates is after the truth. He's after knowledge. He wants to know, for example, what beauty is. He wants to know what piety is. He wants to know what the good is, and so on and so forth. He wants to understand these concepts. So he goes and talks to these jokers and asks them, what is beauty? What is the good? So on and so forth. And then they come up with a definition of what beauty is, or what they think the good is, or whatever. And then he just Swiss cheeses their answers. He's like, nah, that doesn't sound, I don't think that's right. And then he just blows holes in it. And he's embarrassing them because he makes them look stupid. I mean, it's really kind of comical when you read the dialogues of Plato. It's kind of funny. And so these sophists developed followings. They're like celebrity intellectuals, just like today, celebrity intellectuals, and they get the, follow them around like ducklings, and these graduate students or whatever, they do it today. But they did it back then too. They had followings. Well, Socrates is also developing a following. He's got a group of young Athenian boys whose fathers are loaded, and so these boys have really nothing to do all day but hang around Socrates, except they're becoming better educated. They're learning how to think critically. They're learning how to do philosophy. And furthermore, they're going home and they're trying it out on the old man. And they're embarrassing their fathers. Well, Socrates was already wearing out his welcome in Athens. And now this. And now he's embarrassing the best and the brightest. And these young Athenian boys are going home and they're embarrassing their fathers. We can't have this. Men of power and prestige deal with embarrassment worse than anybody ever. So he's got to go. So they arrest him. They arrest Socrates and they charge him with impiety, which is basically a heresy charge, and corruption of the youth. They said, well, Socrates is corrupting our young Athenian boys. Can't have that. So they bring him up on charges, and there's a trial. And that's what the apology is about. And like I said, Plato was there that day. And he bore witness to those events. And it really happened. And so the apology is Socrates providing his defense, his apologia, against these spurious charges. And repeatedly, Socrates makes it clear to his accusers that the trial's a sham, that the trial's a fraud, that there's no veracity to any of this, and it's a joke. Yet, despite the spurious nature of the charges, despite the fraudulent nature of the trial, Socrates, he could get out of this. He could get out of this easy. He says in the apology that, I could bring my wife and kids out here and tell a sad story and get a slap on the wrist and probably get myself out of it. But that's theater. That's the informal fallacy appeal to pity. And I'm not going to do that. Socrates decides he's going to see this thing through to the bitter end. And his position is, if you want to kill an old man, You can go right ahead. I really don't care, because I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. And if you sentenced me to, exile, and so I go live in so Socrates maybe goes and lives in the next city-state or whatever, I'm going to do the same thing there, and the response is going to be the same thing there, because their power elite are no different than this power elite. The power elite everywhere is the same. They get the same priorities, and what Socrates is doing is a threat to those priorities. So, so don't bother with exiling me, because I'll be right back where I'll be in trial. I'll be facing a jury in the next town, in the next city-state. So don't bother. So we're going to see this thing through, because I hold the Athenian justice system in too high a regard to let you guys turn it into a joke. So we're going to see this thing through. So he does. I won't spoil the ending, but you got to read the Phaedo too. You got to read the apology, then you got to read the Phaedo for the dramatic conclusion. But spoiler alert, the trial doesn't go well for Socrates, which he basically predicts. It doesn't go well. So there's the centerpiece of the dialogue, as far as I'm concerned, is near the end, when he says that he decides what his punishment should be. And what his punishment should be, as far as he's concerned, is he should eat for free in the Prytaneum. Now, the Prytaneum was like the magistrate's hall. It was a place where, like celebrity Olympian athletes, and whoever else would be feted, they would throw parties there and stuff like that. Socrates says that he should be able to eat for free and live at public expense, because he's providing a service for Athens. That is, he's teaching them how to, as far as he refers to himself as the gadfly. He's the fly that bites the horse and wakes the horse up. And he's waking up Athens. He's educating Athens. He's waking it up. He's rousing it from its doze. And he's doing Athens a great service. And so it's the least they could do is keep him well fed. So you can imagine the response of his accusers. Also, and I think more importantly, he says the following: the Olympian victor makes you think yourself. Let me start that again. The Olympian victor makes you think yourself happy. I make you be happy. I'll say that again. The Olympian victor makes you think yourself happy. I make you be happy. Now, I think that's a very important line in the apology. What's he saying there? He's drawing the distinction between pleasure and true happiness, what the ancient Greeks called eudaimonia. It means it's a true, deep, contemplative, abiding happiness, not like woohoo at a party happiness. That's not really happiness. That's just having fun. That's pleasure. He's talking about eudaimonia. He's talking about true, deep, contemplative happiness. And that's what he's providing. The Olympian victor, that is the fun distraction, is pleasure. It's here today, gone tomorrow. It's sand through the hourglass. It's cheap. It doesn't mean anything, really. Socrates is providing a long-term investment in the form of educating anyone willing to listen to him. These young Athenian boys, anyone who reads the Apology, really. Just because this took place 2,000 years ago doesn't mean Socrates is not talking to you. And I think he's right. I think bearing that distinction in mind is crucial. Pleasure versus happiness. And happiness, I think, can only come in the form of feeling, becoming a stronger, this sounds like Nietzsche, but I mean like a stronger, more powerful version of yourself. I think that is the key to happiness. I don't see any other way, any other route, but one that results in you becoming stronger and more powerful. Because if we disagree with that, then we're suggesting the opposite, that you can become truly happy by being weaker. I don't know if that's true or even possible. What do I mean by stronger and more powerful? Becoming better educated, which is what Socrates is offering. To become better educated. That makes you a stronger, more powerful version of yourself. I quit drinking about 3.5 years ago. But I used to pop into the occasional pub years ago, and I would usually go by myself. And God, that sounds sad, but I usually would go by myself, and I'd just, whatever, I'd find someone to talk to. But I noticed for years, men, usually men, would gather around the various television screens, and they would talk about the basketball game or the baseball game or whatever was on the television, usually a sporting event. And these were strangers, because I knew they were strangers because they came in separately, and I could tell I can tell the way they were talking to one another that they were strangers. And yet they're having a dialogue. They're discussing the game. Now, a bunch of fellas drinking beer and talking about football or basketball might get intellectually dismissed. This does not paint a very high-minded picture. But I was always impressed with how much they knew. I listened closely. I didn't know what they were talking about. I mean, I couldn't fill a teaspoon with what I know about sports, but I'm like, God, they seem to know a lot. They know about this guy and that team and this game and this scored this many points and this guy got traded to that team and, stats and percentages, and it just never seems to end. And I'm like, how did they know all that stuff? They have like an encyclopedic understanding of this subject, which I know nothing about. Furthermore, they're perfectly willing to challenge the experts. The post-game analysis, a bunch of guys in suits, like talking about, God. I don't think those guys have an influence over the opinions of people watching the game at all. Not to my observation. The people that are in the bar drinking a beer, talking about the game, they seem perfectly confident to challenge authority, challenge the ref, so on and so forth. And so I think, what if? And I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying, what if? I'm just conducting a thought experiment here, which I've conducted many times. What if all those guys in all those pubs watching all those games were instead talking about the banks or U.S. foreign policy or the relationship between the corporate sector and the state sector? In other words, what if they were talking about stuff that really, really mattered? What would be different? If all those millions of guys were talking about things that mattered. Now, you don't need... I mean, you gotta, read the news and read a couple books maybe, but following professional sports requires no greater intellectual energy than following what's going on Wall Street or what's going on in the Middle East. I don't think it requires any more intellectual energy to follow those topics or politics or whatever else, I don't think it requires any more energy. Now, I get it. I understand that. I understand that at the end of a work day, it's nice to have a beer and unwind and watch the game. I get it. I'm not. I totally understand that. But what would happen? What would happen if all those guys were talking about stuff that mattered? I'll tell you what would happen. There'd be panic. There'd be panic in boardrooms all over the United States. CNN and Fox would be like, shit, we got to do journalism now. We have to actually do our jobs. We can't serve up the crap we usually serve up because no educated population would tolerate a CNN or a Fox or an MSNBC. They wouldn't tolerate it. They would just be, they'd be, if they didn't they didn't do an abrupt about face, they would get laughed out of existence. And Wall Street would be in a panic because people would be watching. And people would learn their cryptic BS language that they use, which makes them feel really smart and is designed to make them feel smart and make you feel stupid, right? So you would learn those terms like credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligation, which is a bunch of nonsense. It doesn't take much to learn those terms. And those terms are attached to pretty simple concepts. But they are just, that language is borderline mystical. And there's a mysticism, I think, that in that language. And, it's designed to make them feel really smart and to make you feel dumb. And then you watch the basketball game instead because, much better. I don't feel dumb anymore. When I watch, the news or, I watch some guy in a suit giving a lecture or doing an interview on CNN about, the markets, the equity market or something, I feel dumb. When I watch a basketball game, I don't feel dumb anymore. So you're going to do the thing that, doesn't make you feel dumb. But what if you actually understood what that guy was talking about? The guy doing the interview on CNN talking about the equity market. And you were able to call BS. And what if there were millions of you that could do that? And we're doing that. You can drink beer and talk about that stuff at the same time. It's totally possible, you know. Yeah, there'd be panic. There'd be panic in Wall Street. There'd be panic in the offices of CNN and Fox and MSNBC. There'd be panic at Lockheed Martin. There'd be panic at General Dynamics. There'd be panic when it comes to the defense contractors who live on free money. So we're okay giving the rich free money. They can enjoy socialism, but you can't give the working poor free money because they're too dumb. If you make $20 million a year, obviously you're really smart. And, you can enjoy free money. But if you work for a living, the single mother of two who works a cash register at Walmart, who cleans houses and works at a nursing home on the side and has 2 or 3 jobs, she's too dumb. You make $23 million. You make $20 million a year, and have 3 houses and a private jet, then you're really smart, obviously, and you can get free money. So we can look at the political situation in the United States right now, which is quite woeful, and it's because we're not paying attention. And we don't understand the mechanics of what's happening right in front of our eyes, like the banks, like the linkage between the corporate sector and the state sector, and how foreign and military financing works, and the free money that the defense contractors live on. All that would come to a screeching halt because no educated population would tolerate it. And that is why Socrates got arrested, because the power elite in ancient Athens and the power elite now are the same, because the priorities are the same. I see this on Facebook. Facebook terrifies me. I have about 250 Facebook friends. And there's not very many, but I know some people got a lot more. I have about 250. And of the 250, I would say about 6 of them are interested in anything I have to say. If I post like an interview I did or an essay or something I published, or I get about 6 people. Sometimes fewer than 6. But I look at other people's posts, and here's me and my wife at the Cubs game, and then they get like 150. So I'm not complaining like my numbers are low. I can't help but notice the discrepancy, and I've had other friends who are also posting stuff that they published that they're doing stuff of substance, and they hear crickets. No one's interested. But if you post a picture of a cupcake, you probably get about 90 hits, 90 likes. People just go crazy. It's about Cubs games, and it's about pictures of your pets, that stuff. Then you're gonna rack up the likes, or pictures of your kids in a cap and gown. That's a big one. You probably get 150, maybe more likes. But if you did something, if you published something, or if you did an interview or something like this, I'll get about 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 is about the top. So that just tells me what the culture's priorities are. The culture's priorities are frivolous. I'm not saying you shouldn't be proud of your child for graduating high school or college or whatever. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, yeah, if I posted a picture of a cupcake, I'd probably get 90 hits, 90 likes, 75 likes. But if I post a published essay on something, then I get about 4. So that I think that's telling, and I don't expect large numbers of people to be interested in an essay on classical liberalism, but it does reveal. It does reveal something. It reveals the culture's priorities, and the culture's priorities are distraction, and that's what that's what Socrates is talking about. The Olympian victor makes you think yourself happy. We like pictures of people at the Cubs game, and we like pictures of dogs and cats, and we like pictures of people in caps and gowns, and we like that stuff. Or people at a bar, with doing the devil sign, the devil horns, and like they're really rock and roll. Is it really? Is that rock and roll? Is that an appletini on the table? Yeah, okay. So you're really rock and roll, and flashing the devil horns at the bar, and then you get 90 likes on that easy. Yeah, it's distraction. It's fun, and I get friends tell me that's what social media is for. They don't want to read they don't want to read your essay on Descartes. They want to look at cupcakes and dogs. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. It's fine. I'm not complaining. I'm genuinely not complaining. I'm just saying there's a connection between that and who's in the White House right now. And that's why he's in the White House. Is because we're interested in cupcakes and dogs and Cubs games. And we don't know how the banks work. And we don't know how foreign military financing works. And we don't understand how the defense contractors live on free money. And we don't understand how the wealthy, and I mean not big house Porsche rich, I mean 3 houses and a private jet rich, how they enjoy free money and they get tax cuts, and yeah, they live off the fat of the land. Their life is good. Life is great. If you have 3 houses and a private jet, you're well taken care of. If you're a single mother of 2 at Walmart, you probably just drop dead. And then the voters certainly won't support politicians who are going to make your life easier, because your life really doesn't matter. If you clean houses and work at a nursing home, and you work at Walmart or you work at Target stocking shelves, you can just drop dead. We're gonna put somebody else in the White House. Someone who ridicules people with disabilities, and a guy who talks about dating his daughter. That's better. Ooh, cupcake, doggy picture. Yeah, you see the connection? You see how that works? So, Socrates represents a threat, and that is why he represents a threat. Because the power elite, like I said, in ancient Athens, is really no different than the power elite now. And the people in Wall Street, the people at the defense contractors, the people at CNN and Fox, they thank you for not paying attention. They couldn't be happier. Just talk about the game, click like on that picture of the cupcake. Click like on that picture of the dog. And the people at Goldman Sachs and the people at Lockheed Martin and the people at CNN, thank you. So, that's just a little bit about Socrates and the apology. I think next episode, I'm going to talk about words that kind of irritate me. They do irritate me. Mediterranean, Asian, and then like other non-helpful. And then I want to circle back because I use the word ethnic, and I want to talk about the word ethnic. I want to talk about Hispanic and Latino. There's a whole list. There's a whole list of words I want to talk about. So maybe we'll do that on the next episode. My computer fell asleep. There we go. On the next episode of The Inquiry.